Hey there, folks. Welcome to episode 3. So, last episode we went through and set up the basics of the stat consumption and the regeneration or decay. At the end of the episode, we added in this really basic UI to show off the functionality working for the percentile. However, I had an issue with the hunger bar. Well, I did a quick dig into that and found out what the issue was. So I'll hop out of here quickly. We will go into the content browser. Just going to open up our HUD, go over to our graph, and this one's really easy. It's showing health instead of hunger. So if we change this over to hunger, compile and save, go back. Let's get the content browser out of the way. Launch that. Pull this up. Go to Statline just so we can have an idea. And there you can see, once that little message goes out of the way, the hunger bar is slowly decaying as well. So, with that, a very quick fix from last episode. Again, as I've mentioned, I leave these silly mistakes in because I want you guys to see how I fix them and the sort of things you need to do. In this case, I just took a quick check and seen, oh, I'm polling for the health percentile instead of the hunger. But anyways, in this episode, what we are going to be doing is working on jump functionality and sprinting functionality. So with that, we don't need to be in the editor for a little while, so I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go over to Visual Studio. So we're going to start off with the Statline component. We've been working with that from last episode, and we're going to keep working on it in this episode. And we'll also go into the character and player character. So the first thing we want to do here is we're going to grab the U property value for our core stats because we want that visible anywhere, blueprint read only. We're going to add a new one. Bool B is sprinting equals false. So this is really just going to be an internal flag for the purpose of our stamina regeneration and decay. We're also going to want to add another one. This is going to be a float sprint. Sprint cost multiplier. Let's say that's 2. Then we're going to want to add float jump cost because we're going to work on jump later on. So now with that, again, because we have our stamina, health, hunger, all of our stats, we want all the logic to be retained within this Statline component. We're going to do everything in here and just leverage it through functions that we call from our other classes. So first thing we're going to want to do here is U function blueprint callable. Now, I'll explain that quickly because even though we are dealing with these at a code level, when you go through and you start wanting to add things in like AI and stuff like that, you want to have these exposed to blueprints like this so that your behavior trees and your AI tasks can reference these functions. So anyways, the first one is going to be a bool can sprint. And this is going to be a const. Next one, nope, don't want that. We want to copy this one. Then we want a void set sprinting. We want this to take a const bool reference of is sprinting. And we want another one of bool can jump. And then we want another one of void has jumped. So just to run through these quickly, this again can sprint, not really too much of an issue for things like the player character. That's going to be for your AI behavior trees. This is just a very simple function call that's going to say, yes, you have stamina to sprint. Set sprinting, we're going to use that to tell the Statline component that it is sprinting or not. again, like I mentioned a moment ago, it's for the purposes of stamina usage. Similar thing here, can jump, has jumped. Now, these ones will be making use of in things like the player character, the can jump, has jumped. And again, they'll be used for AI. So we're going to start off with the can sprint. Do that. This one's really easy. Return stamina.current. They're not. And this is one of the things you'll find. You go through and you create something that is a private variable, and you can't access it. So you could go through and say, okay, let's make this public, or what you do is you just add in, you want float get current const return current. So then you go over here, it's stamina.get current greater than 0.0. Simple as that. This is a very basic one. It's like you have some stamina, you can sprint. So that one's easy enough. The next one we want to work on is the set sprinting. So we can do that one. And this one, initially, we're going to move into the other steps. So is B is sprinting equals is sprinting. So what we've done here is literally we're just using this constant value to set our internal flag. However, there is other logic we want to do here. So, well, first of all, what is sprinting? Well, that is moving at a faster pace than your normal movement speed. But, well, we have no place in here where we're defining movement speed. So we want to add that in here. So I'm going to copy this one here, and we're actually going to make a slightly different one here. Actually, I'm going to bring this down so it's all grouped together. Instead of being visible anywhere, we're actually going to use edit defaults only. And what that means is that means you can edit it via the, let me just open it up here. Where'd my content panel go? There it is. Let's open up the blueprint of this quick. So what that means is you can edit the values here within your blueprint manager, but you can't edit them at runtime. They're not even going to be visible at runtime, like in your details panel. So I'm going to hop back to Visual Studio now. So edit defaults only. We want a float walk speed equals, and I already have a rough value for this. It's 125. And then we want, copy this again, float run speed, well, I'll call it sprint to be consistent. Sprint speed equals 450. Now, these are values based on what you want for your game. You want your guy to run at 1200 units per second? Set it at 1200. That's up to you. I'm just using these because they're values I've done through my multiple iterations that I found work for this. So we have a walk speed, we have a sprint speed. Okay, well, we need to be able to define those. And again, because we want our stat line controlling as much of this as possible, what we need to do is get a reference to the character's movement component. And for that, and this is just my own personal preference, how you put these in your header file is up to you, but I'm going to go class uCharacter movement, if I can spell, component pointer owning character movement comp. So this is just saying we're going to have a pointer to the owning character's movement component. We're going to deal with that in a moment. What we do need here is a way, because this is a private one, we need a way to set this and to well, just basically set this value. So what we need to do here is public. Okay, this is annoying me. I'm going to clean these up and get rid of these comments. Okay, so constructor at the top. Oh no, those are variable functions, not variables. And then we don't have to have this accessible to blueprints, but I do anyways. Blueprint callable, void set movement component comp reference, and then we want a const u character movement component pointer comp. I'll just do that. We're going to define that here, create the definition. Now we do need to include the header for this. I'm not going to go through and do that as a, oh, whoops, I missed. So we're going to go include game framework character movement component. Close that out. Okay, and this is just going to be quite simply owning character movement component equals comp. And that we just reference here in the constructor for our character. After we have created the default stat line, we can just go stat line. Oh, what did I call it? I've already forgotten. Wow, set movement component, that's why. And you just go get character movement. And all this is doing is at the point of creating the character. So this is like the blueprint itself within the constructor. We're just passing along its movement component. So in here, we've got that value. And now we can actually do things with, oh, new character component. Oh, yeah, you can't use const on this, sorry. See, a lot of this is my brain uses default practices of like, okay, we're not modifying this, we want it as a const, and I'm not thinking ahead. So you'll see that happen a lot. And again, it's something that happens in my everyday job. So, but anyway, so we've got the owning character movement component, got a pointer to that, and we have our walk speed and our sprint speed. So we can go down here to our set sprinting, and we can go owning character movement comp max walk speed equals, and then we can go B is sprinting. And if it is sprinting, we want to use sprint speed. Otherwise, we want it to be walk speed. And this is a very simple setup here. We're using this value for, like I said, our internal flag, and then we're using our internal flag here to assign which of the two speed values we want to use. Great. So now most games, when you're sprinting, you regain stamina. When you're not sprinting, when you're sprinting, you lose stamina. When you're not sprinting, you regain stamina. So we need to add that logic in there. Which is why we have the tick stats function. So we don't need to keep modifying this base tick component. We can go up here. Now we do have a couple of different ways we can do it. The ways I've tried in the past, it would be things like B is sprinting, and if we are sprinting, it's stamina dot tick stat 0 minus delta time times sprint cost multiplier So what we're doing here, and I'll just explain this quickly, even though this isn't the approach I'm going to be taking. We're basically going, okay, if we're sprinting, we want to tick the stat, but we want it to be a negative value. By default, it's positive. You could also do a times -1. That works as well. Because the sprint cost multiplier itself implies it's a, like, you want to enter a positive value here. That's the reason being. So we've got tick stat. Want to make it a negative value. Again, you could just do a times -1. I like to do this, personal preference. If we're not sprinting, we want to just do our normal stat tick. However, this gets a little complicated when I found you start going into further things like, okay, are you jumping and you have the sprint button down? Well, technically you're not sprinting. Are you holding the sprint button down but you're standing still? Things like that. So I found we actually probably are better off using a unique function specifically for stamina tick. So what we're going to add in is that. So void tick stamina, and same as before, const float reference delta time. All right, and we're going to pull this out. I'm going to move this down here, and we're going to go tick stamina delta time. Now, as I already mentioned, this isn't what we're going to be using here. So there's some additional logic we need to do. And for that, it's going to be if be sprinting. And I'm doing this for a reason, because we're going to expand on this. We want stamina dot tick stat equals 0 minus delta time times, how did I have this? Oh, yes, that's how I had it. And again, I understand the that a computer follows or uses BODMAS, PEDMAS, whatever iteration of that you worked with. However, again, as I mentioned before, for the sake of code clarity, I prefer to actually type it out, including the additional brackets that are not needed. They don't cause any additional issues with the code. It just helps be very clear as to what your intent was. And stamina dot per second. Oh, and we don't have the per second tick. What am I doing? I don't even need that. Sorry, my brain is... So we've got this negative value here we're passing in. So we'll say we're now decrementing it by a factor of 2. Go back, per second tick. My brain, sorry, I haven't had enough coffee today. Tick stat current. So per second tick is normally we're going to say 1. Even if we factor that as coming out as minus, passed in, it's -1. 1 is -1. Yeah, that's -1. Current. Yeah, okay. Sorry, my brain is just having one of those moments this morning. So we have this here. Now, as I had mentioned, actually before we do that, and then we want to return. And then the other one we can just do stamina.tick delta time. So what we've done here, and this is, again, we're going to expand on that, is basically saying if we're sprinting, do this, drop out of the function, otherwise do this. Now, as I mentioned, we need a way to determine, are we holding the sprint button and we're in the middle of the air of a jump? Are we holding the sprint button and not actually moving? So we can add another function for that. Let's close out of this. We're just going to go down here and we're going to go bool is valid sprinting. So if it's valid sprinting, we want to owning movement character component velocity dot. Nope, it is velocity dot length is greater than our walk speed. So what that is checking is, are we moving at a speed faster than what we defined as the walk speed? So that's if you're running. Now technically that also counts if you're falling. So, but we also want to do owning character movement component falling is falling. Now we don't specifically want it to be returning based on is falling. So as this would return true if only if you're falling at a speed faster than your walk speed. We actually want that to be when you're not falling. So simple as that. Let's do that. And what we can do here is add that up there. So what this is doing is, if we're sprinting and it's actually a valid sprint, so we're moving faster than the walk speed, we're not falling. And then we can expand this as well if, for example, we don't want you to be swimming, sorry. Owning character movement component. I think there's a flag for swimming. Yeah, is swimming. Things like that. However, we're not doing that. With my game with swimming, I want you to lose stamina if you're speed swimming. So we've got that in place there. Set the default values from properties. We're going to plan about. Oh yeah, it's not initialized because it's not. Anyways, so with that, we've got the basics of our sprinting in place now. This will get expanded over time. There's other stuff I want to add in there, but right now we're going to just stick with the basics. So we're now going to move on to jumping. So this one is very similar to the can sprint. So we want stamina.getCurrent is greater than or equal to the jump cost. And that's just going to say is, do we have at least enough stamina to make one jump? As simple as that. And then the next one has jumped. So this one is very simple. It is quite literally stamina.adjust 0 minus jump cost. Again, because jump cost is deemed or is presented in a way that it's going to be a positive value. At least every time I read this, my interpretation of how this would work is it costs 10 stamina to jump. You would enter 10, not minus 10. So you just do this, or as mentioned, the other one you could easily do is times -1. Both of those are valid. My personal choice is just to do 0 minus. Because in that way, it's actually doesn't really add any benefit. That's just my personal preference for that. So, well, next we need to leverage this jumping logic and the sprinting logic. So we're going to close the Statline component for now, and we're going to work in the character base class to start with, because again, this is something we want all of the characters, so that's your NPCs, your monsters, your player character, you want all of them to be able to leverage the same functionality and not have to write multiple iterations of the same code. So what we're going to do is we're going to add it as, now I would normally say protected because we only want this class and derived classes being able to use it. However, actually I'll just add it here as jumped. This is just a quick test one. I'm going to do that. Quick reference that. And then we want the player character source, base class player character. I have found, sorry, before I get completely sidetracked in my description, I found that the protected classes you cannot bind to your input when it's from a derived class. Like if we look here, it's perfectly fine for these, but let's find that has jumped. Don't need the braces. Or if there's something that's going to work in 5.4. No, it failed. There we go. Oh, I've got live code. That's why. I'll close out of this. All right, I'm going to pause this and come back as soon as the build's done. All right, folks, we're back and the build finished. It finished like just after I paused, but as you can see here, this is what I was talking about. So we can't call a protected function from a parent class within the enhanced input component. So we're going to have to address that. But beforehand, we're going to go back to here. So we want these to be protected, though. We don't want other classes being able to access these. So what we're going to do to get around that, we're going to go void. Oh, no, we want that as a bool. Bool can jump. And that's going to be a const. Wait for that to come up. And this is just going to be return a stat line. Can jump. And this is just going to go stat line. Has jumped. Now to get around the fact that these two functions can't be called directly from this one, we need to add these to the player character. Now, you can access these protected functions within the enhanced input component. We just can't access the derived functions. So we're going to go void can jump, void bool, can jump const, void has jumped. And we're also going to add in void player jump. Now I'm just going to create these functions quickly. So to explain these quickly, player jump is the function we're actually going to be calling when we jump or we hit the jump button. So that's going to replace this one here. And what we're going to do, if can jump has jumped. Can jump, we are going to return, we want to return that one. And has jumped, we want to call a TF character has jumped. Now, all of these, great, it's going to use the stamina, but it's not actually going to make the character jump. So what we need to do is go back to here, and in the character derived class where we have has jumped, we want a character jump. So what all of this does, just to run through it quickly, and then we'll move on to the sprinting, but we've added in these two protected can jump, has jumped, and those are the derived character class, calling back to our statline component, making sure we have the required stamina to jump, and then saying, okay, we have jump. Now in here, because these are very basic classes, we don't need them to actually have a lot of logic. We're just saying, can we jump? And then we have jumped. We're not doing any logic around checking that. That's what both these two functions are for. And because we can't access the protected functions from the derived class, we had to go through and create basically the exact same thing within the player character, and we added in the player jumped. Now, as I mentioned, we could just quite simply make these public, but then that exposes those to every other class that you create. You could have your game instance, call it if you wanted to, and we want to prevent that from happening. So back in the player character, we've created the player jump function, and that is just quite literally what we use for the enhanced input component and the action mapping. And in there we have the basic logic of, if we can jump, we're going to say we have jumped. Again, very basic. That's all we need. Can jump returns our derived classes call function, and the has jumped again calls our derived classes has jump. So now we need to do pretty much the exact same thing for sprinting. However, sprinting is an on-off. It's not a like, it's toggleable, I think is the best way to describe it. So it's not a singular push the button once. You can set it up to do that if you want. However, in my case, I'm not doing that. I'm setting it up as a push the button down, you're sprinting, release the button, you stop sprinting. So now we already know we're not going to be able to use these within our action mapping, so we're going to have to do the same thing here. But what we're going to do here is bool can sprint const void set sprinting const bool reference is sprinting, and we're going to create those functions quickly. So we want this to, again, like we've done previously, statline can sprint, and we just want to call statline set sprinting, pass through the is sprinting. And as you can see here, a lot of this, because these are all sort of pass-through functions, that's why we're using a lot of the references, because if we didn't, and we'll just take the player character, for example, here, we're going to be creating a bool for the player character. We're then going to create a secondary bool for the character instance of this call. And then finally, it's going to be another bool within the stat line. And those, again, it's a bool. It's a minuscule amount of memory, but it adds up when you think about, oh, I've got 50, 60, 100, 200 actors active with this information. So you'll notice I use references a lot. Again, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I'm not a fan of pointers, just simply because pointers allow a null value, where a reference is a non-null. So unless I specifically need it to be nullable, I don't. But anyways, so we've got can sprint and set sprinting. We need to do the same thing in, well, we don't really need the can sprint so much, but we're going to need to do something similar here in the player character. And I actually just had a complete brain fart moment. We don't need these two functions. We can just go and do this. Go if ATF character, because we only need to expose the player jump. So we're going to get rid of these two. Quickly, I'm going to clean this up. We're doing some refactoring on the fly, but that's just me. So what we're going to do here, though, is we're going to add void sprint on, void sprint off, and then expand these. Now, with that, you could set it up something along the lines of the move and the look where you have an input action value. I don't, because I like to also potentially add in some additional logic so that we're not having to worry about like the triggered event. So anyways, let's go through sprint off. So set sprinting. So this, you can see here when it expands out, we're calling the basic one. That's just quite literally true. Copy that. False. And then down here, well, we want to add it to our input mapping. We need an action. So let's create that. Sprint action. And actually, this is just personal preference. Pragma region input. Okay, so again, this is just personal preference. I like to add the regions in just for grouping certain things. Actually, that's not all input. There's some other things in there. So down to there. And when you start getting a lot of things, like I'm going to have, what, probably 40 different action buttons all said and done. This is going to get a really big and a huge list. They do all need to be here, but we don't want all of, like, don't want to see them all the time. They're sort of a, once they're in there, we're done. But anyway, so in here, we need to add these in. So enhanced input component, bind action, sprint action, trigger event. So there's a few different options in here. There's canceled, which is the buttons released, complete, which is the buttons released in this case, for this context. There is none, so it's if the button's not pushed at all. Ongoing is it's been pushed down for more than one frame. Started is the very first time it's triggered. Triggered is if it's just pushed down. So we want started. We want this, and we want to a TF player character sprint on. And helps if I put a colon, not a semicolon. All right, so we can do pretty much the exact same thing here, except we want this to be sprint off, and we want this to be completed. So let's give this a shot and see if this works. I'll build this quickly, and then I will be back as soon as it's done. All right, folks, you can see the build has gone through here. Everything succeeded. So one thing I did while I was paused there after the build succeeded, I did just launch the editor. So in here, we do have a couple of things we want to do. First thing we're going to need to do is create those input actions for sprinting. We actually only need one, but we're going to go over to the third-person blueprint, third-person project files, input actions, and all we need to do here is we can just duplicate jump, input action sprint, save that, and then we want to go back to the default mapping. Open up the mappings. You can see we have the jump, move, look. We just need to add in sprint, and we're going to add in the key for that. In my case, I'm just going to use left shift. You can either go through this list here and find it, or click the little keyboard icon, and then you can press the respective button. I'm going to save that. Now we do need to go into the third person blueprint and add that sprinting action. So let's go sprint. And we don't have many in here right now, so we can just do that. Now we'll just take a look here actually, and so from what we mentioned, you can see we can edit these here: walk speed, sprint speed. There is one other thing I want to do. We're going to go to the UI quickly. This is just so we can see our stamina. I'm going to add in a new progress bar. Put that at the top. Change that to fill. We want this to be yellow. Now we're going to create a binding. And we can just copy over one of the other ones here. Let's grab these, copy. From here to here. Change this to stamina. Put that up there. Compile. Now, one thing you'll notice, this has just got get %. The reason being for that is I didn't actually name the progress bar. So I'm going to call that stamina. And we're going to fix these quickly. Get stamina %. Compile that. With our compile and save, it's done. So let's move the content browser out of the way. So let's see, is all of this working? So easiest one. Yeah, it's being a little janky for me right on the start. Come on. So you'll notice you can see our thirst is decaying. Our hunger will start decaying shortly. And there you go. And when this finally stops being janky, there we go. So you'll notice we're sprinting right away, but there is no stamina decay. I know exactly what's caused that. We'll fix that in a moment, but we'll stop here. We'll jump. You can see our stamina goes down. I'm going to hit the sprint key and let it go. You can see we drop down to a walk speed. Our stamina is regenerating. Now if I hold sprint, you can see our stamina is decaying. And it's going down at the value we defined, a -2 multiplier. So we have jumping. Now let's see, let's get it up. Can we? Okay, we're below 10. There we go. And we are now regenerating. We still can't jump. You can probably hear me clicking the spacebar. Hit the sprint key. We can sprint. Still can't jump. Let's run out of stamina. And you'll notice nothing happens. We keep sprinting. So those are two things we're going to fix quickly. And then I'm going to call this an episode. So let's hop back to Visual Studio. So the first thing we're going to fix is the fact we start sprinting. So we're going to open up the source file for the stat line, and we're just going to go to on begin play, owning character movement, set walk speed, max walk. It's not set, it is just max walk speed. Max walk speed equals walk speed. If I could spell. Okay, so that's there. And now this is the reason why I had mentioned we were going to be using a dedicated function for the stamina tick. So what we're going to be doing in here, we're going to go inside our sprinting. We're going to go if stamina dot get current. And I just do this in case of mathematical errors, even though we do have a clamp less than or equal to 0. All we want to do is set sprinting false. So just to explain what this is, if we're sprinting in a way that that should count as sprinting, we're going to decrement, our stamina. And then if our stamina is gone, 0 or less in this case, actually I just found with floats, so you want, it's better to put 0.0. If it's less than or equal to 0.0, which means we've ran out of stamina, we want to stop sprinting. So we've got that. Let's go back in here. We're going to run the live code editor quickly. Let me pull that over so you guys can see it's running. Worked very quickly because we had a very small code change. Let's go here. We'll run. Hopefully it's not as janky this time. All right, so now you can see as we start off, we're walking. We hold sprint. Our stamina is going down. Let's jump a lot to get our stamina down. And you notice while we're in the air, it's hard to see. Let me try and get to a high spot here. Our stamina is going up. So that whole is falling is valid. Let's go through, and then, oh, we ran out of stamina, and we started walking again. So with that, folks, as I mentioned, I'm gonna call the episode here. Thank you for watching. Next episode, we are going to be covering what I have called for myself the exhaustion system, excuse me. That is where when you run out of stamina, as you may have seen it in some games, you get a point where your stamina stops regenning for a little while. This you can use for a couple of different things, like you can add in a slight pause after a jump, a longer pause in regeneration after you ran out of stamina and things like that. And with that, thank you again, folks, and I will see you in the next episode.